Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Haley Mitchell Haugen. I'm the founding editor of the quarterly poetry journal Sheila-Na-Gig Online, entering our 10th year this fall. The small press Sheila-Na-Gig Editions, working on our 55th book title currently, and the nonprofit arts organization Sheila-Na-Gig Inc., striving to uplift established poets and new poets everywhere. I hope you'll check us out at sheila-na-gigblog.com, where I encourage you to read the journal online and, of course, to support our authors by buying their books. It is my absolute honor to offer tonight's online platform for spoken and heard. To many of you, our host needs no introduction, but I'm going to give a little bit of background anyway. Kari Gunter-Seymour is the Poet Laureate of Ohio and the author of 3 award-winning collections of poetry, including her latest, Dirt Songs, from Eastover Press in 2024. And A Place So Deep Inside America, It Can't Be Seen, from Sheila-Na-Gig Editions, the winner of the Ohio Poet of the Year Award in 2020. Kari is the executive director of the Women of Appalachia Project and editor of its anthology series, Women Speak. Her work has been featured in American Book Review, Poem a Day, World Literature Today, and the New York Times, just to name a very few places. Welcome, Kari, and everybody to our event tonight. Very excited to be here.
Hey, thank you so much, Haley. I'm so grateful and excited that Sheila-Na-Gig's going to be broadcasting our events this spring and fall. And I want to send out a huge thank you to the Ohio Hearts Council for sponsoring the 2025 season of Spoken and Heard. I also want to be sure to welcome our audience, those with us here this evening, and those who will stream us later on social media or YouTube. So tonight we have poet Joan Kwon Glass and Appalachia's own novelist and poet Monic Ductan. We'll do a short Q&A after the readings for those of you with us tonight, so please jot down your questions and be ready to enter them in the chat at the end of the readings. Okay, enough of that. Let's begin. Monic Ductan lives in Cookeville, Tennessee, which is about 80 miles east of Nashville, for those of you wondering. She teaches writing at Tennessee Tech University. She's the author of Daughters of Muscadine, a book about working-class Black families in rural Georgia. Muscadine won the coveted Weatherford Award and the Tennessee Book Award in fiction. She's also the recipient of an individual artist grant in fiction from the Tennessee Arts Commission, and she recently won first place in the Tennessee Williams and New Orleans Poetry Contest. And she is currently working on both a poetry collection and a new novel. I mean, honestly, Monic, I've had the honor of meeting Monic through my Women of Appalachia project, and I tell you, I could listen to her voice for hours. You can find Daughters of Muscadine at University Press of Kentucky. I will put this link in the chat for those of you here tonight. And welcome, Monic.
Thank you so much, Kari, for that warm introduction. Can everybody hear me all right? Sometimes my earbuds are a little bit touchy. I wanted to start by saying thank you to Kari and to Haley for hosting us tonight. Also, I'm really proud to be reading with Joan. I haven't had a chance to meet her in person, but I'm really looking forward to hearing her poems. I'm going to start with Kari mentioned that I had a poem last month that won the Tennessee Williams New Orleans Literary Festival contest. And it's called Mama Took Grandma to Vote for Kennedy. So I'll start with that poem, the one that won the contest. So it says, Mama took Grandma to vote for Kennedy. It was 1960. History books tell me Black people didn't vote in the rural South, but they did. And later, Mama said, Grandma slumped in a cotton field and cried when Kennedy died. My mind fills in this story because I've not seen many cotton fields. The field is only Grandma's yard. She sags onto the ground near the porch. The tam falls off her head. She makes the crying face so common on her in later years. She must have wailed, caused birds to flee from treetops, sent raindrops back into the clouds. She gave it all she had. Strange to think that Grandma would mourn a white man. Whenever us kids misbehaved, even a little bit, we were warned, they'll put you on the chain gang. She didn't need to tell us who they were. Once a white cop showed up to arrest my uncle. Grandma said, "Don't take him." She emptied her purse, a dingy bag filled with tissues and loose coins. She said, "I'll give you everything I got." So continuing kind of, I guess, in that vein, I'm going to read two of my grandma poems. And these poems, the ones I'm reading tonight, are a part of the poetry collection that I'm working on. It's called Man Sold Separately, and it's about a female speaker who is estranged from the men in her life, her lovers, her father, and her brothers. So I'm going to read my grandma poems. The first one is Photograph, Grandma's Kitchen, 1939. A chicken's white wing, barely visible through the kitchen window. Granddaddy, out there by the chopping block, ringing a chicken's necklace of white feathers. In the kitchen, everything glows in sepia. The bridges of noses, pomaded hair. My toddler aunt and uncle lean in as she tastes from his spoon. Grandma, head kerchiefed, looks into the camera, asking, no, begging, take me out of here. She does not notice the pot bubbling over, liquid wetting the eye of the range. Her belly round with what could only be my mama. Imagine my fingers reaching to touch the belly, to feel mama's limbs, thrash or kick through the womb, the skin, through the years, to me. And my next grandma poem, my grandmother's name was Corrine, and my grandfather was Edgar. So I call this one Edgar and Corrine. After 60 years of marriage, my grandparents rested in separate bedrooms. Her under a patchwork of polka dots, him in overalls, his cigar smoke curling down the hallway to her. Those summer nights, I never saw them touch. Grandma, skin wrinkled as an old kerchief, said his name like a chore, Eck. Imagine the nights they conceived 11 children. Maybe they began, his hand on her back, him dropping his dirty boots atop her hip slip. Had she straightened the rods in his closet, her care of his tackle an aphrodisiac. Maybe they shared a peppermint, licked by her tongue first, then his. Perhaps he woke reaching, wanting to put his fingers in her balding hair. And what of Grandma's love of moon pies? Did he bring her a chocolate one, a lonely candle, a light at its center? They now rest in separate beds, tombstones buried in dandelions, light, air. I was also very proud to have a couple of poems, I think it was 3 poems, accepted in the Women Speak anthology that Kari puts together each year. So I'm going to read 2 of those poems that were published in the anthology. The first one is called Confederate. At the bridge's underbelly stands a woman, thin jacket shielding her from pelting sleet. A worse sight in this town I've scarcely seen. Her slouching there, broken hat brim covering parts of her matted blonde hair. Her fingers in their tattered gloves hold a sign, homeless at Christmas. She's ageless, not because she's aged well, but because I cannot place her age. I think her an old woman, if not for this spry gait that brings her to my car window. Ignoring my boyfriend's sigh, I dig the few dollars from the cup holder, press the bills to her brown glove palm, which matches my own dark skin. My boyfriend stares at something I cannot see until we pull forward. The beggar woman mounts a bike, a Confederate flag on one handlebar, a MAGA flag on the other. As I let my car idle there under the bridge, the cars behind me honk, like a dozen trumpets out of tune. Traffic shakes everything, the icy pavement, the very air whooshing in through the open window. A line of cars ahead of us winds through the sleet, up and up toward the foggy mountains. And I'll read one of the other poems from that anthology, the Women Speak anthology. And this one is called Homer, Georgia. It says, I want to be 14 again, singing Come On Up to Bright Glory in a robed church choir, swaying shoulder to shoulder with round black women who smell like dentine and cocoa butter. Long afternoons passed in the church basement, eating macaroni casserole and cornbread, and Kool-Aid with a curly-haired boy I like. The boy asked me to walk with him outside. We crept over the gravel lot and turned to the graveyard. Tombstones overgrown and peppered with dandelions, we moved farther down the row, past older graves of people who perhaps used to walk this field, with sweethearts who held their hands and whispered. I wore my grown-up sandals, 2 inches tall. How strange it was to think of kissing while standing so close to Granddaddy's grave, imagining his bones beneath our feet, seeing patches of grass newly smushed by my heels, touching this boy's hair, not understanding how to tilt my head when his face is suddenly in front of me. His nose bumps mine, bump, 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 separating our lips. I saw him recently, that boy, who is bald now, and for a moment I understand nostalgia, this longing for a thing that no longer exists. Yesterday, in search of that church, I drove down 198, but there was no gravel lot, no clapboard, no white paint. I'm sure it must be there, but I saw only dense woods and a country road, smelled pine trees and fresh air. I should have stopped and walked those acres to search for the graveyard, to spend some time with Granddaddy and Grandmama. For a moment, my memories were less real because I could not find the burial places where I laughed and I sang, was held underwater by an old country preacher, now long dead. I want to turn this car around, but I keep going into a part of the county I haven't seen, gasping, searching for something familiar, gasping, like coming up for air after a long, deep kiss. I have a couple of poems I wrote years ago when I was in graduate school, and so I'm going to read a few of those now. This one is called My Brother Hands Me a $10 Bill. Says it's cliche for a Black man to buy a watermelon. Makes me buy it for him. The market lined with fruit in every color, bright summer squash, one bruised tomato, leaking its mush onto another. There are things I'm afraid to do because they are cliche. Speak loudly in movie theaters, roll my neck in anger, refuse to tip at a restaurant. And there are things I'd never cease doing, saying, I love the feel of bee in my mouth. You be, I be, she be, be. And if all the lips in the world were lined up before me, I'd admire the plumpest ones. Bee stung, stretched across white teeth and purple gums. This next poem is called Inheritance. It says, Daddy soaked our feet, sanded them, clipped the nails short. Making a sour face, he'd tell us we had our mama's feet. Ashy in the crevices, nails splitting down to the quick. You, sweet potato, he'd say to me, you even got your mama neck. God help you. You're not 12 years old, neck wrinkled as a bulldog. When I was a baby, milk dribbled into my neck wrinkles. Wiping the pleats clean was Daddy's least favorite chore. The mark of mama was too much on my body. You see, Daddy was a pretty man, almond-shaped eyes, a dignified nose, salt and pepper hair, even barbers paused to admire. Mama's hair was a briar's patch of tangles. Nights the brush's bristles cut through, pulling like a ponytail fisted. It was a wonder they married. His hour-long baths, her knees never pushed together enough when sitting in a skirt. But she was pretty, sometimes, in the right light, wearing bright colors. In one photo, the apples of her cheeks are smooth, pretty as a girl's. That was the year she left, her shoulders under the arm of a man. Daddy never saw me right after that. My dry scalp, Mama's too wide hips, sound of one lonely heartbeat in a bed made for two. Maybe he'd hoped to be the one leaving. His old Ford pickup rumbling, fit to catch lightning down the valley road. Here's another poem about family. It's called Christmas, 1986. I lie across a crocheted bedspread. Daddy stands beside me, his head blocking the light, sending shadows. He says, if your mama and me were hanging off a cliff, who would you save? My brother's voice says, both y'all. I'd save y'all both. But Daddy is leaning toward me, eyes narrowed, waiting. I say, Mama. I'd save Mama. He looks through the window at the outline of Mama's body, standing under a naked maple tree. He draws away from me, pretends to laugh. This next poem is about as close to a love poem as I can get. I'm not too big on love poems. So it's called How to Be Massaged by a Man You Think You No Longer Love. Stretch out on your belly, arms in front like Superman, so he can press his fingers under your scapulae. When he says, I like the way you're put together, close your eyes and imagine him taking you apart. When his fingers break the skin and nails scrape taut flesh, pray he doesn't touch the spine, that part of you so brittle it may leave you no choice but to say, I love you. If the spine holds, you'll be damned if he squeezes a lung, makes you wheeze, I love you, for mercy. If you're lucky, if for dinner you've had a rabbit's foot wrapped in 4-leaf clovers, he won't touch the heart. Maybe the steam off its chambers, hot as an overworked machine, will cause him to draw away, oblivious to chambers trembling. So I only have just a few more poems. These last 3 or so are some of my most recent work. This next one is probably my most recent poem. I'm not quite sure if it's finished yet. I started working on it just a couple of weeks ago. It says, teaching streetcar to college literature students. Streetcar Named Desire is a play that I teach in American Lit. So this is a poem that came out of teaching that play. I tell them that if Blanche were alive today, she'd be an Instagram model, refusing to be seen in the wrong light. She'd drape herself in Givenchy, cake the makeup, take 100 selfies a day. Is she a vampire? A student speculates on Blanche's refusal to be seen in bright light. She ain't no vampire, another student says. She just a slut. Slut? Given her penchant for meeting all those men in hotels and her seducing a teen boy, she was indeed a slut. But she was also a sad, sad woman with few choices. What's a 1940s woman to do with no husband and no plantation? Her job teaching Poe would not pay the mortgage on Beautiful Dream. Still, I see her in a way I don't often see literary figures. I know her voice, her walk, the way she sits in a chair, leading with the chest, peeking up at you coyly through thick black lashes. She says, my name is Blanche Dubois, meaning white, white woods. This next poem, it says, I know a woman who waxes her bikini line, though she hasn't had a lover in years. She wouldn't want a man to be repulsed by her hair, how prickly and thick it grows, how it's turned silver in patches. I'm sorry. That's her default line. She texts, I'm sorry to men she doesn't want to see again. I'm sorry, she says to the man who groped her on the dance floor, his palm slapping her cheeks like a stamp. I'm sorry are her only words when she stumbles into my bathroom, spilling her blood onto the sink counter. Never mind the woozy feeling threatening to put her on her back. She's so reassuring, never a bother. I'm sorry to hear those words come from her lips, stinging like liquor, but saying sorry is automatic, more urgent than you're welcome, less aggressive than back up, let me breathe, get me into the cold air, let my lungs leap like a fish into a silver pontoon. Okay, so last poem. As I said, the collection I'm working on is called Man Sold Separately. So it's about different types of estrangement, whether being estranged from a father or brothers or a lover. And I think that's what I was trying to capture in this poem. So it's called Ayanle. I've memorized you, every shape of every mole lined along your spine. I predict your reaction to the bird behavior in our yard, how they fly back and forth from oak to silver maple. What are they waiting for? Summer has come and abandoned us. Fall died. Now only winter promises fresh fallen snow and tingly hands. What are we waiting for? The kettle has whistled high, a scream in another room. The windows have fogged. Come, lover, and tell me about the knives in your warm places. Where do they pierce hardest? Which pains have dulled? How might I, with these hands, pull and stitch the flesh? And I'll stop right there. Thank you so much.
Oh, I don't want you to stop right there. Oh, Monique, thank you so much. I'm so excited that you're going to be putting, that you're putting this collection together. I can hardly wait to be able to pre-order that and hold it in my hands. So thank you so much for sharing poetry tonight. Also, um, yeah, just very, very special having you. Thank you so much. So I guess we'll move forward, and I'm very excited to tell you about Joan Kwon Glass. Joan is a diasporic Korean poet, winner of the 2024 Perugia Press Poetry Prize for her book Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms, and also author of Night Swim, winner of the Diode Book Prize. Joan's poems have been featured or are forthcoming in Poetry, The Slowdown, Passages North, Poetry Daily, Terrain, Ninth Letter, Rattle, Poetry Northwest, Prairie Schooner, and so many other places. She teaches and lives near New Haven, Connecticut. Joan was recently invited to read her work on NPR live from the Emily Dickinson Museum. And I can only imagine how thrilling that must have been. So I'm going to post the link to the podcast in the chat, and I hope those of you who are listening later will Google that so that you can find that wonderful podcast of Joan reading. And I'm also going to put in the chat the Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms. Remember, that's from Perugia Press. You can order it there. And welcome, Joan. I'm just so excited to host you.
Hi, Kari, and thank you so much for the wonderful invitation. I was really just very excited to come this evening, and I I want to also thank everyone who showed up on a Saturday evening for poetry. You are very special people um, in the hearts of poets. I'm sorry, Thursday evening. Oh my God, I'm on vacation this week, and so every day feels like Saturday. But thank you for, for being here on an evening when you could be doing many things. I think that we need poetry right now, very much in this country, very much in the world. And yeah, the reading at the Emily Dickinson Museum with Demisty Bellinger was an absolutely like life affirming experience. It was really fantastic, like a little bit of a dream come true. And the Emily Dickinson Museum is actually one place that was very recently affected by the reduction in funding, a very sudden reduction in funding from the federal government. So if you do feel so inclined, head over and maybe make a small donation to the Emily Dickinson Museum. Okay, so I am going to be reading some poems from my newest book, Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms, and I have a copy right here. I may read one poem that is from a manuscript in progress, and then I'll read a couple of poems from my other books. I have two of them here with me. So my first poetry collection is Night Swim, and then I have one of my chapbooks here, which is called If Rust Can Grow on the Moon. So each of my books are about very specific experiences. I tend to be a writer that puts manuscripts together somewhat chronologically, but definitely with a very specific narrative thread. So Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms is really a compilation of narrative style poems, what have been called confessionalist poems, although that can be kind of a dirty word, where I'm trying to expose myself, expose truth the way that I see it. And also kind of smattered throughout the collection are poems that were written around the 36 hungry ghosts of Buddhism. So I took specific names of hungry ghosts and then wrote into those. Um, this first poem that I'm going to read is called Taking My Daughter Out for Smoothies. And I'm feeling like reading this. I don't usually plan ahead in terms of what I'm going to read. I just try to sort of see what I feel like reading, what the vibe is. But I'm about to have a house full of kids again after a year of just having my 13-year-old at home with me half the time. But I do have three kids and two are in college. So in less than a month, everybody's going to be back. So I've been thinking a lot about just milestones and my own history of motherhood, as well as my kids' experiences with me and with the world. So here is Taking My Daughter Out for Smoothies. 1. On our way to get smoothies, we pass the beach where small hordes of adolescents in bathing suits climb atop the side rails, raise their arms in surrender, and drop one by one into the Long Island Sound. They emerge grinning, slick and satisfied as sailboats stand tall nearby. When I first see them, my instinct is to stop the car, keep them from jumping. Lately, no one is safe. 2. When we get to the smoothie shop, the drive-through line is 12 cars long. While we wait, you play a song called Righteous by Juice WRLD. When I ask, who is this? You roll your eyes. In response, I smile with pursed lips, the same way my mother did when I came home from my fancy New England college, too confident and aggravated that she did not know what I knew. I realized suddenly what she did not say. Oh, daughter, there is so much more than this that I don't know. 3. As I listen to the song, I wince, knowing that lately you've been in pain too, and probably identify with the lyrics. The singer's voice soothes and emboldens me, and I try to think of something clever or moving or brilliant to say, something that dispels the nightmare I imagine that you will not find this world worthy of you one day. I always take you for smoothie runs at dusk, choosing the busiest time of day, hoping for long lines, for traffic, for anything to keep you close to me a little bit longer. 4, you take your smoothie without looking up from your phone. As we wait to turn at the intersection, I could reach across the seat and touch your hand. I could tell you that pain is temporary, that there is a future version of you who will rescue you, that you have to stay alive to meet her. But what 14-year-old girl believes that her mother has answers to any of her questions? 5, I turn on my blinker at the intersection. Outside the car, the world around us quivers with heat, exhausted, as though our mere existence tests its limits. I've been thinking a lot about God lately, you say suddenly. Like, when I pray, how do I even know if he's listening? I nod my head, look left and right, wait for a sign that it's safe to keep going. It's about my daughter, my second child. This next poem is called Armistice, which is sort of like also about parenting too, but I'm a middle school teacher, and once in a while, something just very poetic happens in the classroom. And this was one of those moments that just sort of all came together. This poem is called Armistice. And there's a song called Santoki, which is a Korean nursery rhyme that all of us learn as little kids. So the epigraph for Armistice is a part of the song, which says, Mountain bunny, where are you going? Where are you going? Over the mountain pass. I will climb it alone. So here's Armistice. As children, we sang a Korean nursery rhyme about a lone rabbit who ascends a mountain. None of us can remember learning this song, but all of us know it by heart. We root for the rabbit bouncing her way toward the clouds, determined, stopping to sniff the not yet frozen ground for fallen chestnuts. On my pre-war map of Korea, the peninsula resembles a hare steadying herself on hind legs, daughter of 3 gone kingdoms. She gazes warily to the west, front paws vigilant in front of her. I point this out to my students, American 12-year-olds who are already learning to armistice themselves, determining which wars to surrender, which mountains to conquer. If given the choice between going back in time or into the future, I choose to defy gravity. From here, islands pepper the East Sea, specks unknowable. From here, the DMZ is just the trail of a ghost cloud grazing earth with her ghost feet in search of something she can almost remember, might still imagine. Pulling down a modern world map over Korea, I ask my students, if you could choose to live anywhere in the world, where would you go? one girl, a recent immigrant from Turkey, chooses an island, barely visible. When I ask why, she says, I think there would be less war on an island. I would be safer there. As children, we dreamed the rabbit fat with survival. Now, we teach our own children that home will appear if they just believe. In the song, we never find out if the hare makes it to the summit. Even so, we sing it, raise our hands, fingers hooked in the shape of ears. We hop, smile, tell our children to climb, show them how to lift chestnuts from the ravaged ground. None of us can remember learning this song, but all of us know it by heart. All right. Mhm. I think I'm going to just pop over to why not read this? I usually save this poem for like if I'm reading at a college or something because I feel like I can get away with a little bit more, but this is a small group. And this is also Diane Seuss's favorite poem of mine from the book. She did a blurb for the book, so like I always smile when I look back at this poem. It's called Last Communion. I'm not going to give any info about it before. I'm just going to read it. I will say, okay, content warning. I'm not like a huge fan of those, but content warning for this one is it does mention religious trauma, some of the terrible things that happen in certain types of churches, specifically sexual assault. So if that's something that you would rather not hear, this poem will take about 2 minutes to read. Okay, Last Communion. Here I am, kneeling again before a man who tells me I can be holy while insisting nothing is permanent, not even my precious sins. I am washed in the blood, longing for something sacred, tongue hanging over my bottom lip like a dog. I like to read between the lines of obituaries, try to guess what their family members left out on purpose. You can tell a lot by what isn't there. For example, vague obit of healthy teenager, death by overdose. 50-year-old mom who was a brave warrior, breast cancer. 30-year-old male, donations to NAMI in lieu of flowers, suicide. My sister was an asshole, and now she's dead. Though her life ended at 37, I wrote her eulogy as though she died at age 9 because that was the last time she wasn't an asshole. And I wanted to say something true without pissing everyone off. Here's the thing. If all we have to do is erase our gravest mistakes and take communion or stop breathing one day, what is keeping us from making them all, from relishing each one, knowing in the end they will not define us? When I die, please tell everyone the truth about me. That I walked around this place believing I was a little better than most. That twice I turned away from true love out of pride. Revered books more than men. That I did, in fact, have a favorite child. While you're at it, reveal this truth about us all. That each of us has secrets we take to the grave. Things we want to admit, but are certain no one wants to hear. Tell them that the very last time I ever took communion, I closed my lips around the priest's finger, let him feel my hot tongue against his skin, and he let me. Right. I think I'm going to move from that one to a couple poems from Night Swim. Night Swim is a book that is very specifically about the experience of suicide loss. So the poems in this book will contain that theme. In 2017, I lost my younger sister and her child, who was 11 years old, both to suicide within 2 months of one another. And I wrote this book the following year as I was experiencing acute post-traumatic stress disorder. And I still suffer from some of the symptoms of that, though they're not as acute. And I am in treatment for it. A lot of these poems were written in that state. The poems are also divided into the stages of grief. And in Night Swim, the section on anger is quite long. And I felt that I needed to write those in order to work through them and to get to wherever it was that I was going with my grief. So I will read, let's see. I'll read Dear Sister. This is one that was difficult for me to read in the first few years after writing it. The poems about my sister were harder to write than the poems about my nephew. So here is Dear Sister. Do you remember roller skating in the basement on snow days? We stumbled and soared as outside the tiny window, the Michigan sky confessed its sins. A basket turned over and shook, covering everything. Or how about that summer at Halmoni's house in Korea? We perched on the highest stair and swung our sandaled feet through the gap, nibbling jelly sandwiches with chopsticks and giggling at Haraboji's toupee. Remember how pissed you were the year I went to rehab? How after that you looked at me with uncertainty, like I was still your sister, but less. You probably don't remember the day we buried you, but man, was it a shit show. Missionaries sang all 5 stanzas of Jesus Loves Me. People kept asking me how you did it. I held your friend's Xanax so she wouldn't take too much. An addict holding pills for mourners. Hilarious, right? All I wanted to do was make bad jokes, but you were the only one who would have laughed at them. What no one tells you about losing your sister, about losing her to suicide, is that in one crushing hour, your childhood memories become a moonless well. You try to pull the bucket back up and remember the good times, but since your death, the good times feel just like the bad times. Do you remember how hard it rained at your funeral? How your friend Liz sang the Largo after we'd lowered you into the ground? On rainy days, I still hear that song. Are you still there in the basement where we skated so fast that after a while, all we recognized through the spinning was each other? Do you remember your last breath? Did you feel me take it with you? If I lowered the bucket and sent down my lungs, would you gasp with relief and tug on the line? I have not read that poem in a long time. Thank you for listening to that one. I know these are tough to listen to. Excuse the obnoxious motorcycle driving by my house. Let me read one more from Night Swim, and then I'll move on to a couple from If Rust Can Grow on the Moon. Here is a poem I wrote for my nephew. It's called What I Regret. What I regret. Every summer we spent a week at the lake. You and your cousins caught turtles and minnows before dinner, and they squatted enraptured over the creatures you'd found. They stroked the turtles' backs, picked them up when they wandered too far. When they stuck their whole hands in the bucket, giggling as the fish flurried through their fingers, you turned to me and said quietly, maybe we should set them free. On movie nights, you held a bag of M&Ms open on your lap and waited as your cousins took forever to get settled. They bickered about which pillows they needed, what spot on the couch they'd claimed, who had a bigger scoop of ice cream in their bowl, how it wasn't fair, and could they have more? You never asked for more of anything, not even when your life depended on it. I should have filled your arms with a blooming bushel of your favorite candy, found you a spot close to me on the couch, and asked you what movie made you the happiest. I should have summoned 1,000 turtles just so you could let them go. That last Christmas of your life, all I gave you was an Amazon gift card. I should have asked, what do you dream of holding? Before it's too late, tell me what your heart wants. I'm going to read two poems from If Rust Can Grow on the Moon. This collection was published through Milk and Cake Press, and it's entirely about my addiction and recovery journey. I recently celebrated 10 years clean through a 12-step fellowship. And something really cool about the last poem that I'll read is that it's like made the rounds of 12-step newsletters. So sometimes I'll randomly get somebody who will walk up to me. It's weird. Like we're all supposed to be anonymous, but sometimes someone will figure out who wrote that I'm the person that wrote the poem and will come up to me in a meeting. It's kind of cool, but also kind of weird. But I'll read this one first. It's called Attending a 12-Step Meeting After Learning That Rust Has Grown on the Moon. If rust can grow on the moon's surface 240,000 miles away from oxygen, if solar wind can traverse that vacuum, confounding scientists, turning red the crust of such a scarred and lonesome celestial body, maybe I am capable of more than I think. Maybe everything I need for alchemy is already here in my core and cells and in this room where other addicts sit alive against all odds. Styrofoam cups in our hands filled with bad coffee, steam rising like nebula. If you examine your own hands closely and in good light, you will see that the sheath of you, the webbed tools you were born with, resemble the surface of a planet. They're fragile ropes braided with moon dust, across a strange landscape of prayer. Every small object, even you, is unknown. Did you know it's impossible to see Earth from even the closest star? As our craters turn red, stay close to me. God is a vague notion that anything is possible. So many stars hang blindly in the universe, holding on until they no longer can. All right, I just want to thank Kari again and everybody involved in putting this reading together and all of you for being here. This last poem is called Hymn to Church Basements. It's probably one of my favorite poems that I've ever written, and I like to joke that I'm closing with a positive poem. I don't have a lot of like happy, cheerful poems, but this one at least feels fueled by hope. So here is Hymn to Church Basements. This world loves a grand cathedral, its righteousness and pulpit, purported sanctuary of redemption, holy spire and stilled saints, history of fire and painted glass, pews where congregants pray and worship, pews where congregants pray and worship, troubled by questions they hope someone has answers to. They wait on their knees to be forgiven. But where are the songs of praise for church basements? That lower level, that rock bottom room, sunken and reverent with flickering lights, water-stained ceilings, and coffee-stained carpets. Its full moon of chairs that appear every night at 8 o'clock because a crackhead made a commitment. We don't kneel in church basements. Instead, we squat against walls and stand arms crossed in doorways. We sit slouched and messy, look each other in the eyes and say, I am an addict and I don't want to die. And oh God, is this not a kind of miracle? I prefer my angels banged up and salty, chubby from eating cookies instead of shooting dope. They pull splinters from their wings, hug the newcomer too tightly, shake their heads at me when I don't raise my hand to share. No matter how tough I try to look, no matter how long it takes, they say, keep coming back, kid. Tonight, the addict who overdosed last month, the one who had to be revived with Narcan, is making the coffee. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Joan. I mean, wow. I really personally want to thank you for your courage in every single one of these poems. And I'm sure I speak for everyone here and everyone who's going to hear you read these. And also 10 years of sobriety, that's really amazing. And I have the deepest respect for you for that. An incredibly difficult thing to do. And thank you for sharing these incredibly moving poems from 3 of your books tonight. That was just so generous, and I thank you. This is the time of the evening that I normally ask if anyone in our audience has a question for either both or one of our poets tonight. And if you do not have a question, of course, I always try to have something ready. So I will invite Joan and Monic to turn on their cameras. And everybody, of course, in the chat is putting some notes in there for the two of you. And while we wait to see if someone would like to ask a question, I'm just going to throw one out that everyone always wants to know. I know that we talked about, Monique, you're working on a couple of a collection and a novel, and Joan, it sounded like you're maybe have just completed a manuscript. So anyway, let's talk about what the two of you are up to. What's coming up for both of you? Monique, did you want to go first?
Sure, I jump in and say I work on this poetry collection. Some of the poems I think are still a little rough that I have to go back and revise, but I've been working on them for a few years now. And then I also have a novel that I'm not quite finished with. Yeah.
Excellent. And what about you, Joan?
I'm I'm working on a poetry collection that's like very, very different from what I've written in the past. It's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek look at romance, and not just romance as it relates to love, but the concept of romance as it relates to war. Um, so it kind of like integrates these notions of our romantic beliefs about heroism and being saved. But it's also like, there's also funny poems in there too, just kind of poking fun at my own relationship failures and like the things that I've believed, or the things that we can convince ourselves of, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's the collection. Right now, the title right now is called Love, War, and Other Scams.
Oh, wow. Wow, what a title.
That's what it is right now. I don't know that any editor will be like, yes, let's call it that, but
Let's hope. Let's hope you find a brave editor. Oh my
yeah,
gosh, that's amazing.
thank
Um,
you.
so we do have a question. Janet has this one for Monique. Since you write both, and I think she means by that, novels and poetry, does your poetry brain and prose brain support or hinder one another when writing? And how do you decide which one you're working on?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know that I can answer it very well. I always tell people that poetry probably is the genre that's the closest to my heart. And I do think that sometimes when I'm sitting down to write, I'll think about a poem, or sometimes I'll start my own work on a prose work by imagining a poem or reading a poem out loud to myself. So I think my writing's very personal, but especially the poems that I'm working on. I don't know that I really am able always to decide, is this going to be prose or is this going to be a poem? I think there's a lot of overlap in there. So I write a lot about my family in both genres. Yeah.
That's interesting. Hmm. Okay, so here's one for Joan. You mentioned that you write to expose yourself, but so many of us struggle with finding courage or the support to be so vulnerable. So true. Wow. To take that one step toward the edge in revealing ourselves or our thoughts. I wonder if you could talk about being brave as part of, as a poet. At least that's how I tend to think of you, as a poet with such a brave voice. Yes, Marianne, that's so beautifully expressed.
Thank you for that question. I don't I have had that kind of question before, and like I don't know that my answer is ever really a good answer, other than to say that I don't consider myself brave at all. I think for me, more of what it is like I just write what I feel compelled to write with the assumption that no one will ever read it. So, in writing that way, those are the kinds of poems that end up coming out. Um, and also, I think my life history plays a lot into my kind of disregard for maybe what people will think of me or what might offend someone or what might be misinterpreted because I grew up with a tremendous amount of trauma and like really explicit racism as a very young child from my mother is Korean, but my father is white. And my father's family was not thrilled with the fact that their son had married a Korean woman. And so, I was called terrible names as a child, and I just learned to steel myself at a very young age. And I'm talking like 5, 6 years old. So I became, in some ways, like, I don't recommend that. Like I became very isolated in a lot of ways, but very strong, um, in terms of like what other people thought of me. I was always kind of prepared to hear something terrible about myself. And so it's like, well, why not write the poems that I want to write? You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but so I don't feel like I'm necessarily brave. I would consider myself a survivor for sure. Um, and writing is a way to survive a lot of things and also portrays the ways in which I have survived certain situations.
Yeah. And I really think that's what we respond to, Joan, is that you're not maudlin about it. You kind of state the facts. Um, and it doesn't, you don't even sound so sad for yourself. You just kind of state the facts as though you're just kind of working through them. And that's why we think it's brave, because as Marianne is saying, we're just not sure, if we can do that, and you have done it so exquisitely. And
Well,
your
thank you.
response is, well, I've been through the worst. What can they do to me now? A kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think just to like follow up on that, but there are things that I haven't been able to do right. Like I don't write love poems. I've been in love, you know, I can't write them. So what does it mean to write bravely? Like those are the poems that I think would make me feel truly vulnerable. And I haven't been able to get there yet. Instead, I'm writing poems that make fun of it.
Mm,
So I think it depends on, how you see it, like how you look at it. But
yeah.
I appreciate that a lot.
Well, we appreciate you. And then here's another from Monique. It's kind of similar. I've always thought of you as a creative nonfiction and short fiction writer. I have to say that, Monique, me too. When you submitted poems to the Women of Appalachia Project, I was blown away. I thought I didn't even know she was a poet. And then tonight I've heard you say that, that's kind of your love, is poetry. Of course, those of us who are poets know that it's the novelists who actually make a living at writing, whereas the poets rarely do. So there is that part of it. But Marianne is asking, she wonders, what are some of the ways that you switch? And you talked a little bit about that. But she says, what does writing fiction give you for writing poems and vice versa? So maybe just get a little deeper into that.
Okay. Yeah, I started in my MFA program as a poet. So my first year I was writing poems and I took a nonfiction workshop and just kind of got into writing prose. So I mean, I've published, a little bit in each of those three genres, essays and fiction and poetry. I don't really know that I'm always able to switch it up so well. I think a lot of times I'm inspired by whatever it is I'm reading at the time. So if I start reading, a great collection of essays and it kind of inspires me to write something, or if I'm teaching some poems that I really like in my literature class, then it inspires me and makes me want to write poetry. So I think that if you were to kind of look at my work, look at it, stand back and kind of look at my whole body of what I'm working on, I think there's a lot of overlap. And as I was saying earlier, I tend to write a lot about my family or about growing up. And you'll see that in my prose as well as in my poetry. But thank you for that question. Yeah.
Thank you for that wonderful answer. And this is so great. I love that the audience is participating in the questions tonight, because now we have another for Joan. And I actually wanted to talk about this as well, about if Joan would talk about participating in a 12-step program, and how it kind of facilitates your writing. This person says, my son is a recovering addict. He writes poetry as well. And again, you are brave. You are both brave, Tamara says. So, Joan, are you willing to talk a bit about that, or?
Sure. I mean, well, I don't think I'd be alive without it. And different things work for different people. So I'm not like the poster child for any particular group, but just for me, this 12-step program works for me. It works for my brain. It just kind of like makes sense to me. So there's that, I can be here as a result of that. I think it also gave me back my ability to pursue dreams. I gave up on dreams for a very long time, and I was just focused on survival and not being in withdrawal. So, when you're in active addiction, there's really very little that you can focus on beyond, getting enough, having enough to get to the next day or the next hour or whatever. So I think it facilitates my ability to be creative, to be less clouded, to feel things very deeply, even when I don't necessarily want to. Because one of the reasons why, I started using in the first place, well, part of it was genetic. It runs in my family, but the other part just had to do with having a harder time than most people with emotion. So experiencing one emotion like that I didn't want to feel would make me feel like the world was ending. There used to be this, I don't know if this expression is still used, but it used to be called highly sensitive person, like an HSP, where everything kind of hits you harder than most people. I still am that way with certain things, like with sounds. I get completely overwhelmed and almost like in a panic if there are too many conflicting noises, like I can't focus on anything. Just stuff like that. But I think allowing me to engage with the world and connect with other people, that's another thing, and have some self-awareness. It's a great question. And congratulations to your son and to you, because I've also loved an addict. And so I know what that's like. Haven't had a child, who was an addict, but thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Lots of bravery here tonight. This has really, really, really been very special. Anybody else in the audience have a question for either Joan or Monique or both? Kind of going, gone. Okay. Well, then I want to say thanks to all who've come out this evening and all who will watch at a later date. Oh my, they have no idea what they're in for, do they? This is so wonderful. I really want to thank Haley again and Sheila-Na-Gig Editions and Online Journal for being our rock this time around this year for broadcasting our events, and the Ohio Arts Council for sponsoring. We could not do this without them. Please buy our guests' books. We need to do this. We've got to keep the written word alive. So buying books is just so important, especially now. And then I hope all of you will join me next month on May 15th as I host the extraordinary Willie Carver Jr., another one of our Appalachian treasures, author of Gay Poems for Red States, and Katie Dozier, the haiku editor for One Art and an editor at Rattle Magazine. So until we meet again, friends, I just want to say good night. Take very good care. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.